All right. Good evening. It is good to see you guys here. I want to thank you for coming. And if I didn't catch you yet, there are notes on the stand in the center. There is no harm, no foul in getting up to get those. You'll notice it's a blank page, so it's kind of like choose your own adventure. But we'll open the rest of it up later. But right now, we are very grateful to Samantha Rodriguez from the Hopkinsville Police Department for coming out and for sharing with us about this very important topic of technology. The kids are not in here for right now because, hey, we don't want to give them any ideas. Just kidding. I'm not saying that's what we're doing. But we do want you guys to be aware. And so, Samantha, we are so grateful for you coming. I would like to pray for us, and then I'm going to turn the time over to Samantha. After she is done, we will go back to the gym for dinner and the second session. So let's pray and ask the Lord to guide and direct us tonight. Father God, thank you so much for your grace to us and for bringing us together here today. Thank you so much for Detective Rodriguez and the words that you've given her to share with us to help us think through technology in this day and age. And Lord, as we consider discipleship, we consider being formed into the image of Christ and helping one another to grow in Christ-likeness. I pray, Lord, that you would guide and direct our time tonight for your glory and for the good of our families and our communities and this world. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Samantha?
First, I want to start off by saying thank y'all for having me. This is a pretty important topic, and it's getting even more important as technology advances and with things that kids have access to these days. If you're not familiar, some of the stuff may kind of blow you away at things that kids, even elementary school kids, can do and have access to. I'm going to start off. My name is Samantha Rodriguez. I'm a detective with the Hopkinsville Police Department. I've been there since 2013. I started as a civilian crime scene tech. I have a bachelor's degree in crime scene investigation from Liberty University. Did that for a little while. Got really bored sitting down in the evidence room, not doing, we would go out and work major crime scenes, but fortunately Hopkinsville doesn't get the amount of homicides and stuff that like Nashville or something does. So rather than sitting in what I call the dungeon, because there's no windows or anything, I decided that I wanted to go out on patrol where all the fun is at, when you're driving fast and chasing bad guys and all that good stuff. Did that up until 2018. I was a training officer for a little while. I trained new recruits on the street. Then a spot came open in electronic crimes upstairs in detectives. Something I never, ever, ever considered doing. Generally, the electronic crimes position is what people refer to as the child porn position. Like, nobody wants to do that job. Nobody wants to investigate that stuff. Fortunately, we get very, very, very little reports of that here in Hopkinsville. So I spend the majority of my time working credit card fraud and check fraud and that kind of stuff, which I enjoy. That's fine. But I've been up there since 2018 and really enjoy it. One of the things that I do, I'm a task force officer with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. And so they work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. People report tips to them, and they forward it to the appropriate agency and jurisdiction. So when someone reports a crime that they think a child is being exploited in Hopkinsville, they forward it to the Hopkinsville Police Department. It comes to me, and I investigate it. I think at this point, I have had, in the 3 years I've been up there, I've only had 2 come to me. So that's really good. We're not getting a whole lot of reports of children being legitimately exploited in Hopkinsville. In addition to all that, I assist on almost every investigation, felony investigation, upstairs because I do all the data extractions from cell phones, computers, tablets, anything electronic, essentially. I was fortunate enough, the department sent me to a lot of expensive training to be able to learn how to use these expensive programs. And so now we have the capability. How many people in here use iPhones? It's a majority. Okay. So if any one of you committed a crime in here tonight and I thought there would be evidence of it on your phone, I could seize it. And even if you didn't give me the passcode, we have technology that gets me everything on that phone, even if it's deleted. So that's a fantastic tool for us as investigators, because people do everything on their phones. They talk about everything they do to everybody. So it's been a really great tool. And then we do computers. Don't do a whole lot of computers because nobody's really using actual computers anymore. Your phone is a mini computer. You can do almost everything on it that you can do on an actual computer, which is great because they take forever. So cell phones, I can get the information off of a cell phone in about an hour. And then I just have to go through it. Like I said, in addition to helping on all those investigations, I, for whatever reason, was given all the financial crimes, which I enjoy working. A lot of people don't because they're really boring and really tedious. But that includes check fraud, credit card fraud, identity theft. I am on call, so I do work. I do work some shootings, some robberies, that type thing. Where's he at? Next slide, please. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is cyberbullying. And I don't know if the video is first or not. No. Okay. So cyberbullying has become a huge problem, of course, even back when I was in high school, which I'm 30. I'll just say it. So I graduated in 2008. So even when I was back in high school, we had regular like peer-to-peer bullying. We didn't really have so much of the cyberbullying. It was starting to become a thing. I still had dial-up internet, so it was really a pain to get on the internet anyway. So 19% of teens have reported been bullied either in person, online, by text, or by phone. I'm going to say that number is probably actually significantly higher. Just from what I see in my profession day to day, I'm sure what you guys see and hear about from your children, I would say 19 is probably a pretty low number. 20% of those reported seriously thinking about attempting suicide. And that's the biggest problem with cyberbullying, is it leads to children either committing or attempting to commit suicide. And then all forms of bullying were significantly associated with increases in suicidal ideation. And those victims were almost twice as likely to have attempted suicide compared to youth who had not experienced cyberbullying. I think, was it a couple years ago, Trigg County had a high school student that committed suicide that was due to bullying. It's a very real thing. We deal with, as police officers, we deal with mental health issues a lot, especially with, I would say we probably get 2 to 3 calls a day of somebody that's feeling suicidal that we have to go deal with, which is a lot. You know, growing up, I didn't realize how many people struggle with that, and I believe it's getting worse as technology advances because you have instant connection with people right there. You don't have to wait on that dial-up to log on to a computer to call somebody something or talk about them. You can literally pull your phone out of your pocket and say whatever you want to whoever you want. Next slide. So we're going to watch this video real quick about cyberbullying.
So the math test today was like really difficult, wasn't it? I seriously thought.
I wish she would shower every once in a while.
Did she just go to the bathroom? I think she would have fixed her hair.
Hey Kendall, I was wondering if maybe you wanted to hang out this weekend.
Sorry, I don't think it's gonna work out.
Okay.
you asked out Kendall.
I didn't know you liked girls.
Little by little, it all adds up.
Next slide. Okay, so for cyberbullying, the state of Kentucky doesn't have one specific to it. So the best thing that really fits is harassing communications. And basically, it's exactly what it says. When you communicate with somebody with the intent to intimidate, harass, annoy, or alarm another person by telephone, I don't even think anybody uses a telegraph anymore, mail, or any other form of electronic or written communication in a manner which causes annoyance or alarm and serves no purpose of legitimate communication. It's a Class B misdemeanor, which is kind of unfortunate because for something that can cause so much harm, there's really not a whole lot of repercussions for it, which is why we try to encourage people to be so proactive, on the proactive side of it, to keep their children from doing it, to teach their kids what to do if they are being bullied, so they don't think that they have no other option but to take their own life. Next slide. So some things to talk about since we don't really have any kids in here, because I do give this presentation to high school students. So some things to talk to them about. It's okay not to like somebody. I'm sure everybody has someone in here that they don't like, but it's not okay to bully them. And if they see something online that's hurtful, don't share it, don't like it, don't encourage that behavior. Encourage them to think about how they'd feel if someone else did that to them. Don't engage it. Don't comment back with something just as mean or worse. Save it. Evidence is the biggest thing I stress to people, is proof. If you see something, especially Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, whatever, and especially since everybody's on their phones, screenshot it before it goes away, because people will get in the heat of the moment going on, and then after things have cooled down, they'll go, I'm going to get in trouble for that. I need to take that down. And there went anything that, any proof that we might have been able to use to say that this person did or did not. And then just being a good person. If they see someone being bullied, stand up for them. Don't put yourself in harm's way, obviously, if it's that bad. But be nice to them. Sit with them. Say something nice to them. Are all things that kids can do to kind of help balance out when someone is being negative to them. Next slide. If anyone's interested, this is a website that you can go to. It's got all kinds of material about everything we're going to talk about today. It's got specific age-appropriate categories with material all the way down to elementary school. There's handouts, flyers, videos, anything you could think of. Pretty much everything from this presentation is pulled from that website. So especially if there's any teachers or anybody in here that would like, some material to go along with it, this is a great website. Next slide. Next, we're going to talk about social media, really the bane of existence right now. I'm sure there are stories that could be told in this room of things that people did when they were younger that no one knows about because social media didn't exist back then. I hear it all the time. But everybody is so quick to put everything they do on social media anymore. And I will not lie, I am 100% guilty. I show horses. I went to a horse show last night, and there's stuff on my Facebook from the horse show last night. There's pictures of me and my daughter. But stuff like that's okay. That's how I keep up with my family. They're not all here. But you got to be careful what you put on social media. Next slide. So, for example, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they said according to the FBI in 2019, there were 421,394 NCIC entries for missing children in the United States. So what that means, NCIC is a national database for anything that's stolen, missing. If you have a warrant and in the state of Kentucky and you're entered NCIC, that means that we will come get you from if you're located in any other state in the United States. When they run your name and birthday or your driver's license, it'll pop up and say, yep, you did this and Kentucky wants you. Same thing for any other state. But it's not just for warrants. So if your child goes missing, we will enter them in NCIC so that if any other police officer in any state in the United States runs across them, it will pull up that they are missing and that we are looking for them. Same thing with stolen vehicles. So that's a lot of kids that are missing, because to get entered into NCIC, it's not just a report like an email or something sent in that says, hey, my kid's missing. That's someone reported a child missing, police officers went out, investigated, made sure it was a legitimate claim, and now they're entered and came actually back to the police department and manually entered them into NCIC. So this is almost 500,000 legitimate claims of missing children. That's a lot of missing kids. Now, these do include runaways. So not all of them are legitimate like child abductions, but runaways can still be the same thing. There's a lot of kids that run away because of mental issues or bad home conditions and get sucked into a really, really bad part of the world. Next slide. Okay, so I usually ask this again to high schoolers. Does anybody in here have Instagram? A couple. Okay. I do too. I'm not on it very often. I forget it's there. So I usually ask this, and of course, generally in a high school setting, almost every hand is in the air. And then I will ask, do you know all of them? Raise your hand if you know every single person that follows you on Instagram. And there are almost no hands. So that's a problem, because, you'll see, and it happens on Facebook too, you'll get suggested friends. You'll have somebody add you, and then you're like, oh, we have 5 or 6 mutual friends. They're probably okay. Well, people will harvest friends, if that makes sense. They will start liking or they will start adding people with a bunch of friends that you're friends with, because they know if you have 4,000 or 5,000 friends, you're probably going to accept just about any friend request that comes your way. So now they will have mutual friends with you, which will make you more likely to accept their friend request or follow if we're talking about Instagram. So then once you accept, you allow them to follow you, you accept their friend request. If you normally had your page locked down, your privacy settings were pretty good, now they can see everything on there. So if you put, if you show post pictures of you and your kids playing in the yard, and there's your house in the background with your big pretty house number, on the door, they have access to that now, where they wouldn't have had it before. Not to say don't post pictures of you playing with your kids. Just be kind of cognizant of what's in those pictures, because it's not hard at all for someone to find you if they really wanted to. So of the more than 23,500 endangered runaways reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 2018, 1 in 7, they said, were likely to be victims of child sex trafficking. So the question is, how does that happen? Kind of like what I just talked about. If someone targets a child, they may use their friends to get to them to get access to their social media. And it's pretty easy to find out if a kid has social media like Facebook. It's pretty easy to figure out where they go to school at. I would say probably 80 to 85% of the juveniles in this town that have, for whatever reason, their name, their social media profile, whatever has come across my desk, I'll say, attends Hopkinsville High School, attends Christian County High School. Very easy. And some of that's not even hidden. So now I know what they look like. I know where they go to school. I might know where they live, probably know some of their interests. It'd be very easy to talk to a child who's kind of naive about it and get them to trust me and think that I'm someone that they could, they could go with or they could talk to. And especially if we were to start messaging on Facebook, that I can really gain their trust. I can start talking. I can pretend to be somebody else, which is generally what happens. You'll get people that make a whole complete fake profile. Of course, they don't, because they don't want to get caught. And I can pretend to be friends with all of your friends because I know who they are, because they added me too. And I can see specific things on their profile and tell you about them. And then you'll really trust me, because how would I know that if I wasn't real? But it's just something you just learn by just scrolling through somebody's social media, because everything is on there. And kids don't think about that when they post stuff on social media. So today, the average age of child sex trafficking victims reported missing to NCMEC is only 15 years old. That's super young, and I'm honestly, with the way things are progressing, I'm honestly afraid that's probably going to get younger. And child sex trafficking has been reported in all 50 states. So it's not exclusive to the more populated states. It's in the rural states. It's here in Kentucky. Next slide. So what we've been talking about falls into the online enticement and sextortion. And the online enticement, it's a broad category. It covers when a child is being groomed to take sexually explicit images and then ultimately meet face-to-face with someone for either sexual purposes, or they continue to engage in conversations online. So one of the big things I see, I actually just had a case come across my desk the other day of a high school student who had been in a conversation with a girl on Instagram. And they talked back and forth for a couple days. She said all the right things, talked him into taking sexually explicit photos of himself and sending them to her. Come to find out, she was a grown man. And so then once he had those photos, it turned into, well, I'm going to start sending these to all of your friends. And he had the list of his friends because they were, because he followed him on Instagram. I need you to send me $500, or I'm going to start sending this to everybody that you're friends with. So he sent them to one, sent the photos to the child's sister. And then he said, if I don't get X amount of money, I'm going to send it to your coach for the team that, for the whatever team he was on at one of the high schools. And you may think, how in the world did this person know that this kid was on this team and this was the coach? All that information is available on his social media account. And once he added this person, they had access to all of that. Ultimately, the unfortunate thing, and this happens quite a bit, I was not able to do a thing about it. I can get records from Facebook and Instagram with a search warrant. I had access. I got all the messages, all the pictures, everything that transpired between the two of them. The man's in Nigeria. So I can't do a thing about that. And that's unfortunate. And that's a big thing that, another thing that kids don't realize is that they may think, well, if I do something and somebody does something to try to hurt me, well, the police will handle it. We will if they're here. I have no jurisdiction to arrest somebody in Nigeria. I wouldn't even know where to start. So essentially, I have to look at that family and say, I'm sorry, but those photos are out there and I can't get them back. And that person is free to do with them whatever they want. So it would be better to not have them out there at all. And that's where this comes in, is explaining to these kids I understand why you want to do this. I understand that you're not thinking ahead and you're living for right now, because that's what teenagers do. But they don't understand the long-term impacts of their actions now, and that's something we have got to get into their heads. Next slide. So in 2019, the cyber tip line received more than 16.9 million reports, most of which related to sexual child abuse material, again, online enticement, including sextortion, child sex trafficking, and child sexual molestation. Another one of the big things, and this is probably honestly the biggest thing that I get with children in our city right now is, so let me give you a scenario. You got two high schoolers that are dating, sexually active. They engage in sexual activities or take sexually explicit photos and send them to each other. They break up. One of them gets upset at the other one and decides, well, I've still got those photos. I'm going to send those to everybody we go to school with. It's a huge problem. I get more reports of that than I care to admit. And kids think, well, you sent them to me, so I can do whatever I want to with them. That's not accurate. It can get them in a lot of trouble. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Same thing can be said for videos. They take videos of themselves, each other, and post them and send them to people. And there's no way to get that stuff back. And the kids don't realize that. Next slide. So I want to talk about a couple of statutes. And I don't expect you guys to remember all these verbatim. It's a lot of legal jargon. But something to take back to your kids when if they do that, I don't want to say when, if they do this kind of stuff. If for whatever reason they get in trouble, somebody goes to their phone and they have a sexually explicit picture of someone who is under the age of 18, just the fact that they have it is a felony. It doesn't matter if they took it. It doesn't matter if they sent it to anybody. They could have received it and went, oh, that's funny, let me save it to my phone. And the fact that they have it, if they get caught with it, is a felony. In the state of Kentucky, it's a Class D felony. Should they send it to someone, they have committed a completely separate felony. And then, let me add to that, if they have multiple pictures, it's automatically presumed that they're distributing, even if they're really not. The state of Kentucky says that more than one unit, which is more than one picture, even if it's of the same person, it's presumed that you're going to distribute it. So the first time is a D felony. The second time it moves up to a C felony. So this one is the big one that's going to get people hemmed up if videos are involved. I've had to do this to one juvenile already this year. This was a case of he and his girlfriend, both under the age of 16, took a video of them engaged in a sexual activity. She breaks up with him. He doesn't like it. He sends it out on Snapchat. A couple people saved it, which is how I ended up with it. She was under 16. So she was under 16. I think she was 15 at the time and he was 16. So at 16 years old, he got hit with 2 Class B felonies for 2 different videos. And that's the other thing that children need to understand is that each separate piece of media is a separate count. So if somebody's, 16-year-old girlfriend sends them 10 photos of themselves undressed and they save all 10 of them, that's 10 different felony charges or 10 different counts of the same felony charge. The state of Kentucky does not play with sexually explicit images and videos of children, and for good reason. But the big thing is kids don't understand the seriousness of what they're doing, because this is serious stuff. A B felony carries 10 to 20 years in prison. Now, is that juvenile that I charge going to get that? No. But it's the point is these are very serious charges, and these kids don't understand that this is what they're doing, that their behavior meets the criteria for this kind of stuff. And if somebody really wanted to push the issue, yeah, before they turn 18, they could be convicted felons for what they thought was just harmless stuff that they were doing, sending photos back and forth. Next slide. I do also want to point out, because I've had this too, an argument, I don't want to say argument, so a rebuttal, that one person I interviewed in a case gave me was, well, you couldn't actually see anything because we covered it up with emojis. So like is anybody familiar with Snapchat? Yeah. So, you can put emojis and stuff, in your picture or whatever. And so they did. And it covered the explicit parts with emojis. Well, the state of Kentucky said that doesn't matter. It says that if they are exposed in an obscene manner of unclothed or apparently unclothed human, male, or female private areas, even if they are obscured or altered, still fits. It doesn't matter that you can't actually see anything. If you can tell from the photo, had it not been altered, you should be able to see it. It's still considered child pornography. Next slide. So, when you're having these conversations, what you need to tell your children is that if they receive something inappropriate, as a matter of fact, let me ask, has anybody's children in here come to them and said that they saw where somebody had sent something inappropriate, whether or not it was sent to them? It's like, hey, so-and-so got pictures of them sent out all on Snapchat or whatever. Have y'all had that? Yeah, I figured as much. But if they get it, they need to delete it. Obviously, do not save it. If they get caught with it, they're in trouble. If they have previously asked that person not to send them something, and they continue to do it, make sure they tell somebody. If they see something inappropriate, make sure they tell somebody, and stress to them that they will not be in trouble for reporting it. So if your child gets sent an inappropriate photo or a sexually explicit photo of someone else that they go to school with, even if it's an adult, it doesn't even have to be a kid. If they get something inappropriate, make sure they know to report it and that they will not be in trouble for reporting it. I mean, that would be ridiculous for us to chastise a child for reporting something because they technically have it. Well, we can get rid of it. That's not an issue, but we need to know when this stuff is happening. The other thing I want to stress to them, if you can go to the next slide, kind of going back to the kid who got enticed on Instagram to send pictures of himself, and then the person asked for money to keep from sending them out. Make sure they know once they put something on the internet, it never, ever, ever leaves. We can't get it back. The police can't get it back. Those super secret, 3-letter agencies, the FBI and all that, they can't get it back. The dark web is a real thing. I don't know if there's any IT guru people in here. The dark web is very real. That's where a lot of this stuff exists at. And people fluctuate between, what we use as the internet and the dark web. They buy these photos. They sell these photos. And it's very easy once your children send them out to somebody for them to collect them, and then they're going to sell your children's photos on the dark web to somebody else. And then when they turn around and they graduate and they go to college, spend all this time at college and then apply for that job they've worked so hard for, and their employer goes to Google them, because people do, is that image going to pop back up? And there's going to be a whole lot of questions they've got to answer about why there's stuff like that on the internet when their name is searched. And that's really heartbreaking to think that a child could work for something that hard and then have it all thrown away because of a dumb mistake they made when they were younger. But again, I go back to kids don't think like that. So it's up to us to make sure they understand and think like that, to keep that from happening to them. Does anybody have any questions about anything that I've talked about? Yes. Sure. Sure. Just in case anybody didn't hear, she asked if there's any way to keep random text messages from random people coming in. Short answer to that is no. I'll put it to you this way. I have a department issued cell phone in addition to my personal one. And it is a City of Hopkinsville number. The City of Hopkinsville owns the number. I get texts and calls all the time wanting to extend my car's warranty. So, the best thing I tell people to do is if you get something from somebody that you don't know and you don't want it anymore, to block them. Now, that doesn't mean they won't come back with another number. They generally do. I don't know how many spam numbers I have blocked in my phone right now for that exact thing. Made me think of it on the subject of that. Make sure your children with cell phones know that if they get a call or text that says they have a warrant for their arrest, if they don't pay $500 or whatever, no, we don't call you when we just come get you. We don't give you a heads up. And also, juveniles don't have warrants in the database, in a national database. So it's all handled in a completely separate system. So they just let them know if they get any stuff like that, it's an absolute scam. Yes. Okay, so she asked about secret apps. The short answer to that is there are so many apps that we would be spending the rest of the night up here talking about apps. If I talked about every single one, the big ones, kids are starting to go away from Facebook. Instagram is a huge one. Snapchat is the devil, essentially. There's no good reason for Snapchat. None. I fully believe it was created with ill intentions. The good news about Snapchat is the messages used to delete automatically. They don't anymore. And a lot of kids don't realize that. So if I get a search warrant for their Snapchat, I can get all that conversation. The one thing I cannot get is person-to-person snaps. So if you take a photo of something and send it directly to one other person, once they see it, it's gone. I can't get that with any kind of legal process. If it gets posted to your story, I can get that. If you talk about it in your messages, I can see that. There's a lot of spoofing apps, like TextNow, WhatsApp, that will generate a phone number that cannot be traced back to that phone. A lot of people who entice children online use stuff like that because it's so hard for law enforcement to track and to trace. The short answer is technology will always be ahead of us. Always. We are constantly playing, as law enforcement, constantly playing catch up to what is created. I know there's a really famous hidden calculator app where kids will store photos. It looks like a calculator, but you key in. You can use it it functions as a calculator until you key in whatever passcode you choose, and then it opens, and there's a vault with photos stored, and you'll never know it was there. I would encourage you guys to Google hidden apps. And that will show you what some of these look like. So if you go through your kid's phone and see one of those, you probably want to have a conversation about that. Nope, they won't pick up on them because the technology is just not there. And I guess the argument would also, some people would also argue that, well, not everyone uses them for malicious purposes. But why are you hiding something if there's no ill intent, you know? Anybody else have any other questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. That goes back to, like I was talking about, the kids, they will not be in trouble for reporting it. So there's some instances, like I'll bring Snapchat, for example, where if it's sent to you, you can open it, and then you have a limited amount of time before that thing disappears. If you have and if you screenshot it, it notifies the person. So if you have the ability to save that for the purpose of reporting it to law enforcement, that is okay, because we can be standing right there next to you. When you show it to us, we do what we need to do and then delete it off your phone. That way we know you don't have it. You won't be in trouble for, you can't get caught with it, and you won't be in trouble for reporting it to us. Does that answer your question? Okay. There was another hand over here. Oh, okay. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. As far as on a civilian side, not to my knowledge. And I don't believe that the software that we are hopefully getting, I have to send them off to the Secret Service right now if I can't get into a locked iPhone. But that software is $28,000 a year to have. Yeah, it's pricey. But it's a great tool. And the good news is, if you think that you have something, that your child has something on their phone, and I've actually had this happen. I've done it for people. If you think your child has something they shouldn't have on their phone and you want to know, you can bring it to the police department and sign a consent to search form, and I can dump it for you and verify. And then I can wipe the phone and get everything off of it and give it back to you. That's something that we will do. We don't charge anything for it. We'll be happy to do that if you think that there's something on there. And if there is, on something like that, we leave it up to you guys. Generally, I've found that on that kind of situation, more progress is made if the parents handle it themselves rather than getting law enforcement involved. We're just kind of there as a support for you guys because we have the technology to do it. So say there was something criminal found on the phone, that doesn't automatically mean I'm going to be like, all right, your kid's going to jail. I'm going to tell you about it, and I'm going to say, hey, what do you want to do about this? And if you say nothing, I'll handle it. I'll wipe the phone if you want me to, hand it back to you, and tell you if you need anything, let me know. Anybody else? Oh, that's a terrible question. Because my 3-year-old has my iPad. So, however, I have it completely locked down. She can't get into anything without it sending me a text message. Really, I did that more so because at 3, she doesn't know anything, but I didn't want her accidentally buying a bunch of apps. I don't know. I'm going to say that it's going to depend on the maturity level of your child, because all children are different. All kids mature at a different rate. You know what you trust your kid with. I'm trying to think when I got my first cell phone, and it was a big honking thing. I was in middle school. And I think it depends on what you've got going on in your life. Do you have a home phone? I know a lot of people don't. We don't have one. Is your kid old enough to be at home by themselves, but if something were to happen, do they need a way to call 911? You can get cell phones that are Wi-Fi only. So they only work when they're connected to Wi-Fi. Disconnected cell phones will call 911. So if you have a cell phone that doesn't have service, and it will still call 911 and still get through to our dispatchers. And then there's all kind of parental control apps out there. Have y'all heard of like Life 360? Does anybody have that on their kids' phones? I actually had to use that in a case in a shooting. As a matter of fact, him and his girlfriend had Life 360 on their phones, and he shot at a car, and it tracked everything. It was beautiful. So it does its job. It really does. And again, you can go into your settings and lock down a lot of what they do, like I have for my daughter, where she can't get into anything without me having to put in a passcode. So it's really depends on your lifestyle and what you trust your kids with. I don't think that I would let mine have one. Of course, she's only 3, but until she was probably, I don't know, probably getting close to going into high school, just because I can't imagine why she'd need one. At that age, she's going to be around adults. At least in my mind, I mean, even if it's at some kind of practice or something like that, that could get a hold of me. But again, it's up to you. It's whatever you know your kids better than anybody else. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Detective Rodriguez, and thank you guys as well. I think Miss Robin communicated with most of you ahead of time that, hey, some of this stuff that we're going to be talking about is not stuff that we as parents necessarily want to think about. I don't know about you, but I've decided to convert and become Amish. But thank you so much for helping us with that. And I would encourage you guys to just take a quick photo. Hey, we've all got these technological devices in our pockets. Take a quick photo in case you do need to reach out to Detective Rodriguez. And thank you again for your time this evening. Guys, we are going to take a break of about, let's shoot for, I'm not good at math, 7 minutes. 7 minutes, and at 6 o'clock, we will get started back in the gym. All right, thank you. All right, guys. Well, hey, thank you for checking this video out. I do want to let you know that this is not being recorded live at the technology conference. Unfortunately, due to technological incapability, my own, we did not get that recorded. But this is the same content. And as we're looking at this issue of technology and discipleship, how that relates to those of us who are Christ followers, relates to our life in our homes, I want to encourage you to grab a Bible and to look at that with me, as we're going to be going to the beginning to determine how we understand technology and its relationship with us as disciples of Christ. So as you're looking for Genesis, looking for that Bible, maybe you've just pressed pause, but you're back with us now. I want to just confess at the beginning that my relationship with technology has widely varied. I've seen it as an incredible tool for the gospel, and at the same time, I've joked repeatedly that I think we should convert and become Amish and just get rid of all of these digital devices. However, I don't think that that is the healthy perspective, nor do I think an unambiguous embrace of technology is what Christ would call his church to. Instead, we need to be faithful to the Christian faith that we've inherited, which is that we are to be in the world, but not of the world. That means we don't abandon the wider world as we pursue personal holiness or transformation. Instead, we're called to operate within the world, pursuing transformation for that world with the power of the gospel. For those of us living in the 21st century, that means that technology is going to be a part of that. But thinking well about technology, recognizing that it's a tool, not evil, but not necessarily good either. It's a tool that we can use for the gospel, or that the enemy could use against us to derail our walk with Christ. And so we have to think carefully about technology if we're going to engage it. We don't want to mislabel it and just say it's all bad. We don't want to mislabel it and say it's all good. Instead, we treat it like a tool. So, how do we think through technology as it relates to discipleship? Discipleship is one of those terms that we hear a lot in church, but it's one that we don't often define, and I really think that we ought to. By the same token, technology could mean a lot of different things if you're using it in an academic sense versus using it in kind of the colloquial sense. And the final definition in our conference title that we need to deal with is that of home, right? Home, what does that mean? What is this avenue, this primary venue where we do discipleship, where we have to think about how discipleship relates to technology? What is that? So I want to begin with just defining those three terms. First off, what is discipleship? Discipleship, I would say, and this is probably not the most comprehensive definition you'll ever hear, but I would say it's simply training a person to be what God made him or her to be. So training a person to be what God made him or her to be. When we think about training, that is a term that really makes it nuts and bolts, puts the rubber on the road, if you will. We can't just think of discipleship as an academic exercise. It's not simply learning about Christ or learning about our faith. It's the active engagement in the practice of that faith. And for example, a sports star does not get where they are by reading books about their sport. They get where they are by putting into practice maybe things that they've read, maybe things they've seen from others, maybe things that their coach has taught them. But they are training themselves through physical exertion and mental study to become better at their sport. That's the same thing with discipleship. It is a training whereby we are seeking to be what God made us to be, or where we are discipling others. We're training others, helping them to become what God made them to be. I want you to keep in the back of your mind that idea of being what God made us to be, because I think that definition of discipleship will help us point us back to the text that we're going to be looking at a little later. The next definition I want to give you is that of technology. What is technology? Quite simply, I guess good definition. It's one that I've created based off of several others. Technology is a product of human knowledge designed to change the human experience of the world. One more time, technology is a product of human knowledge designed to change the human experience of the world. So your iPhone is technology, but by the same token, so is your weed eater. These are all products of human knowledge whereby we take insights gained from one another, from studying God's world and understanding our place in it, and using that to change our experience of the world. An iPhone fundamentally reshapes an Android phone similarly. Any smart device reshapes our interaction, our experience of the world that has been made. By the same token, so does that weed eater, right? It changes the way we interact with
creation. And so any product of human knowledge, whether it's got a gasoline engine on it, or is a digital device powered by a lithium battery, or is simply a better hand scythe, just operated with human sweat and muscle, that's still technology. It's something that we're doing to change our experience of the world around us. However, for the context that I'm talking about, technology in this context with discipleship and the home, I want us to think through not just that definition, but particularly how it relates to the digital devices that you and I engage with, how it relates to our computers, our smartphones, the internet, things of that nature. The final thing that I think we need to define is home. What is home? It's not just a house. It's not just four walls. It's not just something that we construct. It's really more than that, right? A home can be a tent in a nomadic tribe. A home can be a brick McMansion here in the States, and anywhere in between. A home is simply the place and the people with whom we live. So that is the place where we're going to spend most of our time. That is the place where I believe we are most likely to influence one another. If we're Christ followers, that means we ought to be influencing one another in the context of our home to look more like Christ. So the place where, or the people with whom we live, that's home. Now, all of these things tie together when we talk about discipleship and the tech-wise home. If we are supposed to be training one another to be what God made us to be, and if technology is a tool that by human knowledge is used to shape our experience of the world, and home is the people and place where we live, then how do all of those things relate? What is the thing that ties them together? And I would argue that, as in most cases, we have to go back farther than we think if we're going to answer those kind of questions, thinking through discipleship and home. As a matter of fact, I would argue we need to go back all the way to the beginning, right? In order to understand how we disciple one another in light of technology within our home, we have to understand, what were we made for? What was it that God created us to do and to be? And in order to get that understanding, we turn to Genesis chapter 1, and we'll look at a couple passages here in Genesis 1, 2, and 3. I'm not going to read the whole chapters here, but I would encourage you to do that at some point to get the whole context. The first section that I want to read is Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. They will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, and the whole earth, and the creatures that crawl on the ground." So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every creature that crawls on the earth." And then it proceeds to go on and talk about all of the things that God has provided for them in the midst of that task. But the first couple things we see in there is that we are created to reflect the Creator. We're created to serve the Creator. We are essentially his stewards. He makes everything, and then he sets mankind in its midst and says, "Serve me by ruling over this." And so those two are related. We're made to serve the Creator, and we're made to rule over creation. We see that here, and we begin to get the sense that this matters, because the God who made everything, who spoke the universe into existence, is the God who says, we're going to make mankind in our image. Right? So however we serve the Creator and however we rule over the creation, it ought to be in the image of our Creator. But another thing we see as we keep moving through this narrative in Genesis chapter 2, we can look at verse 3 and see that God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, for on it he rested from all his work of creation. Now, if we are created in the image of God, which this text says we are, and I would argue that we are, and if that being created in his image means that we are to serve him by ruling over creation, then we image God in the work that we do by also resting from the work that we do. And so I would say from Genesis chapter 2, verse 3, that we are made to rest. Not all the time, and not wholly. God's rest, even in the midst of that seventh day, we know he was still sustaining creation. He's still upholding it. He's still ruling over it. However, he is actively seeking to rest, which sounds strange to our ears to think of actively seeking to rest, but that's what he's doing. And he does so intentionally because we, created in his image, appointed to rule over the creation, nonetheless have that same responsibility to rest and to trust God with what is going on around us. Number 4, we are made for active engagement in the world. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, we get a deeper dive into God's creation of mankind. And it says, "The Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to watch over it." So we are made not just to rest, but also to be actively engaged in the world. And the way that that active engagement is defined as work, and it's defined as watching over. Work is something that we often associate with the fall, and we say this is part of the fallen reality. This is not God's created intent. We are created to kick back, take it easy. Many of us imagine that the point of our lives is to just rest continually. That's not the case. We are made to work. But it's the nature of our work that's in view. We are made for productive work. We're made to engage the world in a way that doesn't just serve us, but it also serves the creation. We're made to make things better than they were when we found them. We're meant to contribute something, not just consume things. This is what that idea of active engagement through work means. But it also says that we're supposed to watch over the creation, which means that we're supposed to be intently engaged mentally and visually and in a protective sense. We're supposed to watch over the creation in that way, particularly in the sense of guarding it. So we're supposed to work and watch over. I've just summed those up as active engagement in the world. Then we look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. Now, all along through Genesis 2, God has been saying, this is good, this is good, this is good. Now in 18, he says, "Then the Lord God said, it is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper corresponding to him." Now, he's talking about the man. He's talking about Adam here, but the principle holds. It is not good for man to be alone. And the way I would term that is we are made for relationship. We are not meant to be isolated beings. We are not meant to be the man on the island. We are meant to be in community. We're meant to be in relationship with those around us, fellow image bearers, but also with the God who made us. We're not meant to be cut off in any direction, vertically or horizontally, from who God is and what God has made. With that, even then, when we get down to the individual level, we're not meant to be cut off. We're meant for relationship, not isolation. We're also made to be internally whole beings. We're meant to be whole. We are not meant to be fragmented. What do I mean? I mean that we are physical, right? I have a body, you have a body. My body is sitting in front of a television camera right now and speaking these words to you. Your body is sitting wherever it is that you are listening to this, and yet your brain is also working. Your physical ears are taking sound waves and funneling them into your auditory nerve, which is then transmitting signals, impulses to your brain that is turning them into language that, provided I'm speaking clearly or you understand even my unclear speech, you're hearing and you're interpreting, and it has meaning once it's filtered through your brain. And so we are not just physical, we're also mental. And then something I say today may give you a great deal of comfort. Something I say today may get you angry, right? You've taken that information that's come in through the physical channel of your ears and your brain, and you turn that into information. Then you turn that into an emotional response. We're emotional beings, right? But we would affirm too that there is some part of us beyond just the chemical stimulus of our brain, beyond just the meaning imparted by language and the community we share, beyond just the emotional reaction that we have to stimuli. We would argue that there is something bigger than that as Christ followers. We would say that there is a soul, that there is some part of us that is integrally linked to everything else, but is nonetheless distinct from it. That soul, that spiritual nature. So we are meant to be physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. All of those things coming together. And in the text, we see it's not good for us to be alone. That's our relationship with others and with God. But then as far as our wholeness, we see verse 25 of chapter 2, both the man and his wife were naked yet felt no shame. Now, I just skipped a very important section where Adam is introduced to the woman that God has made for him, Eve, and we skip all of that to get to this point where it says they were naked and felt no shame. At this point in their life, their physical condition was that of being unclothed. But the bigger, deeper reality that's going on here is that condition inspired in them no shame. There was no disparity between their physical state and their mental state, their emotional state and their spiritual state. They were whole beings. There was nothing to be ashamed of. There was no disconnect whereby their physical body would cause them mental shame, or whereby their emotional state would cause them spiritual fear. They were whole beings. That's a whole big discussion that we won't have right now for the sake of time. But if you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk more about that. Finally, the last thing is we are meant in this whole beingness, in this related sense, in this stewardship sense, in this resting sense, in this image of God, in this ruling sense, we are made to be fulfilled in that. We are meant for fulfillment. We are made for fulfillment. In chapter 3, verse 6. Now, if you've been around Genesis a lot, you know that in chapter 3, that's where we see what we refer to as the fall with a capital F there. The fall. But before that final step is taken, we read this in verse 6. The woman saw that the tree was good for food and was delightful to look at, and it was desirable for obtaining wisdom. All right, these are all good things. God said, I will give you these things for food. Right? He said that we are meant to feel hunger, and he has provided the physical creation around us to fulfill that need. But we also have this innate longing for what is beautiful, that the product of our visual cortex is not just intriguing to us. It's not just meant to give us clues as to where our next meal is coming from, but there are aspects of it that strike awe in us. There is this beauty outside of us that we're meant to see and to resonate with. And here she sees that and resonates with it. And then finally, we understand that it was desirable for obtaining wisdom. We are meant for something more, to obtain outside of ourselves something that is yet beneficial to us, something that is integral to our experience. And so if God provides these desires for such things, for food, for beauty, for wisdom, then we ought to assume that he is intending us to find fulfillment for those things. The trouble comes in. When all these things that we're made for, made to serve, made to rule, made to rest, made for active engagement, made for relationship, made to be whole, made for fulfillment. The trouble comes if we begin to look for fulfillment in the wrong place. And that's what Eve did, because that verse 6 goes on and says she took some of the fruit and ate it, and she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it. What they're doing is they're doing what God said not to do. Earlier, God had said that you can eat from any tree. Just don't eat from this one. The enemy shows up, the serpent, as he's represented in this text, who we would say this is the enemy of God's people. This is the enemy of God himself. This is Satan. He comes and he tempts Eve. And he says, did God really say that? Well, really, God is actually trying to keep you from fulfillment. God didn't give you these desires. He's keeping the best stuff for himself. But if you'll disobey him, if you will reject his creation mandate, if you'll reject what he made you for, then your eyes will be opened, right? And you'll be like God, right? That's what Satan tempts Adam and Eve with. He tempts them with a fulfillment that comes not in accordance with how God made them, not in accordance with their creator's timeline, but outside of that. Tempts them to find fulfillment elsewhere. And in doing so, we see that he completely flips almost every single one of their created purposes. And what I want to help us understand is that just as that tree, the knowledge of good and evil, that was a good thing that God had made. He looked at everything he made. He said, this is very good. This was a good thing that he had made. And I believe there was a plan and a purpose for it. There was a right use of this tree. Adam and Eve simply went out of order. They got it out of line, and they pursued fulfillment outside of God's plan. And in doing so, we see, here's technology. We bring this into our day. Here's technology. And I think that, like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it's one of those things that can be good. It's something that God in his sovereignty has given amongst men, right? We have the creative ability to make these things. God has done that. He is still sovereign over creation. None of this takes him by surprise. And we can use technology well and in a way that honors God. But there's that simultaneous temptation coming at us from the enemy, whereby we would be told, take this thing that is under God's sovereignty, but use it in a way that he does not intend. Use it to subvert what you were made to be. And Christ follower, what we are supposed to do is continually be seeking to be that which God has made us to be, particularly in Christ. What we are made to be is meant to be resurfacing. But every step along the way, there's going to be temptation. And so how does technology then serve as a temptation to us? Right? If it's a tool, it's not a bad, it's not a good, it's just something we can use as humans to shape our experience of the world. How would technology be used to tempt us? And I think that the first thing I would say is technology tempts us to serve ourselves instead of serving the Creator. Technology is something that is given, right? And here it comes to us, and we have a choice, Christ follower. We're going to use this technology to serve ourselves, to do what we want to do with it, or are we going to use it for the gospel? I think about an organization like Mission Aviation Fellowship, right? These men and women have felt called of God to use the skills and abilities that they've developed, that they've practiced, that they've honed, to use technology, in this case, aircraft, communications equipment, that kind of stuff, to take the gospel and to transport mission teams and stuff into places where the gospel's never been. Mission Aviation Fellowship flies planes. That's technology. They fly helicopters. That's technology. They use radios, and they have recording equipment, and that's technology. And they are saying, let's use this technology to serve our Creator and serve our fellow human beings. But technology also tempts us to serve ourselves. And we could take the same plane, the same helicopter, the same communications equipment, and we could say, you know what, this is for me, and I'm going to just fly over and get myself a peanut butter and banana sandwich whenever I want it. Or this is for me, and nobody else can use it. I'm going to reserve this for myself. Or I'm going to use my skills or my abilities in communication or in flight. I'm going to use that to enrich myself. Right? It can go either way, but technology can be used to tempt us to just serve ourselves. We think about our phones, right? We can use them to call somebody who is in need of an encouraging word. We could shoot a text to somebody at the beginning of the day, hey, praying for you this morning. Is there anything particular I can lift up? Or we can use it to jump on social media and scroll for hours and waste a ton of time. Or we can use it to access images or things that we ought not to do, things that would push us away from Christ, not towards Christ. Again, the technology is not good or bad. It's just how we choose to use it. But the temptation is always there to use it to serve our own desires. The other thing that technology is used, we're meant to be ruling over creation. We're meant to be saying to creation, this is how we can best accomplish God's design. Instead, technology tempts us to submit to submit ourselves to it. Technology tempts us to submit to it. We're meant to rule over it. We're meant to have control. And yet there's this continual pull, if you will, from technology, particularly in the digital world, to submit ourselves to it. To jump on Facebook and say, hey, I'm going to send a message to my buddy who's suffering, but then an hour later I find myself still scrolling. I'm not in control at that moment. The technology has taken over. And I would argue that a lot of our modern digital technology is designed to bring us into submission, to addict us. And we got to guard against that, brothers and sisters. Third thing, technology tempts us to gluttony, right? Now, that sounds strange because, we associate gluttony with food, overeating. But gluttony is not just related to food. It really is, in my mind anyways, a stand-in term for overconsumption. Technology tempts us to overconsumption. Now, We saw in Genesis chapter 2, we are made to rest as our Creator rested. We are made to disconnect at times and to be reminded that we are not in control, and to be reminded that God is, and that He's given us everything that we need. And that rest is important. Technology would encourage us to never rest, right? It used to be you could get bored standing in line at the supermarket. In the day of the smartphone, nobody gets bored in the supermarket. Everybody pulls their phone out and starts scrolling and starts looking, starts consuming information, starts consuming entertainment, starts consuming amusement, instead of saying, maybe I can just use this time to rest. Maybe I can use this time to give my mind a break. If you've ever been to Walmart, you need a break after walking those aisles. And yet often we just jump right into consuming again, using the technology that we have. Technology also tempts us to passive disengagement. Remember I said that we are made for active engagement, to work and to watch. But technology tempts us to sit back, to see problems in the world and to treat them as momentary distractions, to treat them from the safety of our own couch, never stirring to action, never responding to the needs we see, simply taking them in and making them one more item of consumption. We're passive and we're disengaged from the real world. We're very much engaged on the screen in our hand or the screen on our wall, but we are disengaged from the real world, which is where we were intended to be. We're meant to be active, we're meant to be engaged. Instead, technology urges us to just sit passively and to disengage, to let the information come to us but never do anything with it. And that is not how we are made. So we have to guard against that. Again, technology can be good. It could make us aware of these needs and we could then actively engage with them, but it tempts us all the time to simply take the information in and do nothing with it. Another thing, technology tempts us to isolate ourselves. Right? If we are made for relationship, it's not good for the man to be alone. It's not good for you and I to be alone. And yet, if you walk into a restaurant, any place in America today, it is likely you will see at least one table where there are people sitting across from one another, and yet they are completely absorbed in the digital device in their hand, their technological development there. And they are isolated. They may be physically proximate with the people around them, but they are mentally, emotionally, relationally isolated from one another, each engaged in their own little world. Now, technology does not have to isolate. I think that the invention of the telephone was an incredible gift to humanity, to be able to call and to maintain contact with loved ones, even though many miles might intervene, right? I think that today with Zoom and video chat and those kind of things, like these are incredible gifts that can actually foster relationships. I've lived in Kentucky now for about 4 months, and every week I get to engage via a Zoom call with a gentleman who lives in Utah and get to keep that relationship going. He encourages me, I encourage him. We're able to do that in a relational way because of technology. So again, technology is not evil, but if we let it, it will tempt us to isolate ourselves from one another. Technology tempts us to fragment ourselves. Remember, I talked about how we're meant for relationship, but also we're meant to be whole. We're meant to be these physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual beings. All of those things working together so that we are not cut off, so that we do not have shame and fear and these things where we split ourselves. And yet, technology continually urges us to do that, to disassociate our physical actions in response to technology from our spiritual life, to disassociate our emotions from our mental processes, to disassociate our mental processes from our spiritual lives, to disassociate our spiritual lives from our physical lives, right? Continually seeks to fragment us out, to appeal to just one aspect of who we are rather than the whole being. And so we have to guard against that. We have to say, no, I cannot just engage my mind. I must also engage my physical body. I can't just engage my physical body. I must also engage my emotions and think through what emotional response does God call forth from me in regard to this, as well as saying that our spiritual lives are going to be intimately connected with those other things. Again, that is a whole big topic, but technology, the temptation is always there for us to simply engage it at one level rather than as whole beings. Finally, technology, like I said before, tempts us to shortcut God's plan for fulfillment. God intends for us to be fulfilled. As C.S. Lewis says, if we find in ourselves a desire for something that this world cannot fulfill, we must conclude that we were made for another. That's a rough paraphrase, but the idea stands that we are meant to seek fulfillment. Technology offers us what sounds like a really tempting thing. Hey, you can have that now, you can have that easily, you can have that instantly in the palm of your hand or right there on the wall in your living room. And we're made to shortcut how God intends for us to find fulfillment. We're made to shortcut that. And so that temptation is continually there for us. So a lot of stuff there, thinking about technology and what we were made for and how technology is used by our enemy to tempt us away from what God made us to be. So I think there's some questions that we need to ask ourselves when we come into thinking about, okay, how do we do this? How do we engage with technology without letting it become a temptation to us, using it instead according to how God made us? And a series of questions here, I'll just run through these. Am I serving the Creator or myself with this technology at this moment? We have to ask that in every moment, I feel like, right? At this moment, I have technology surrounding me. There's a backdrop behind me. There are lights shining on me. There's a video camera in front of me. There's a microphone above my head that you cannot see. There is paper and ink printed and bound in a Bible. There's notes that I typed out on a screen digitally and then printed that became this sheet of paper, right? All of this technology, and I have to ask, am I serving myself right now with this, or am I serving the Creator? The same thing is true when we're driving down the road, right? This is technology. Am I serving the Creator or am I serving myself? As we pull out our phone, am I serving the Creator or am I serving myself with this technology at this moment? The second related question, am I ruling over this technology or is it ruling over me at this moment? Right now, I feel very much on the spot. I feel like the technology is ruling over me, the glare of the camera eye looking at me, right? But at the same time, I can jump up and I can press stop record, right? I pull out my phone. Am I ruling over it or is it ruling over me? Am I pulling it out because I have a purpose? I need to connect with a brother or sister. I need to share some encouragement with somebody. I need to call and communicate some vital information. Or am I pulling it out because I don't want to be bored or because I've created a habit whereby at any moment of downtime, I have to have this thing in my hand? That would be an instance of it ruling over me. Number 3, am I resting? And I don't think I defined this earlier, but rest to me is just letting God's word and God's world be enough for me. And am I resting at this moment, or am I engaged in gluttony? Right? Am I trying to consume more than God intended with this technology at this moment? Am I giving space in my life, or am I trying to find meaning and fulfillment in some sort of frenetic activity? Resting versus gluttony. Am I actively engaged in the real world, or am I passively disengaged from the real world with this technology at this moment? Is what I just read on Facebook going to lead me to action, to a phone call, to walking across the street and meeting a need for my neighbor, or am I going to take the information of their need and just ignore it and continue scrolling? Am I active or passive? Am I engaged or disengaged? Number 5, am I giving myself to the real people around me, or am I isolating myself from them with this technology at this moment? If there's a real person in front of me, my phone ought not to be in front of me unless I'm looking something up for that person. If there's a real person at the table with me, I ought not to be giving my attention to a digital version of my life that I'm trying to curate for my, hundreds, maybe 10 followers on Instagram, right? I want to be more engaged. I want to be active, right? Best way to do that is take the real people around me and give my attention to them rather than isolating myself from them. Number 6, am I acting as a whole person, or am I acting as a fragmented being with this technology? Am I just engaging one aspect of me with this technology at this moment? Or am I giving myself to this? Is this something where God is in control and I am seeking to live as he made me to live? Or am I seeking to live as somebody who's getting an emotional high off of the number of likes my post got? Or am I somebody who's seeking to deaden some spiritual angst in me with distraction from technology? Finally, question number 7, am I seeking fulfillment according to God's plan, or am I attempting to shortcut it with this technology at this moment? Now, all that I've said so far could be frightening to you. There's a lot there going on. What are we made for? How does technology tempt us away from that? How do we think through the relationship between those? What are questions we can ask? But we have to get down to, how do we do this? How do we take this home, if you will, right? That idea of home, the place where we live, the people we live with, that has to be the point at which our discipleship works in with our technology. And people say that church is the place where discipleship takes place. Let me tell you, church is fantastic. I love the local church. I'm giving my life to the local church, but church isn't enough. Church, it can supplement what's happening at home. But it cannot take the place of what's happening at home. The means by which God designed, I'm convinced of this, the means by which God designed transformation to take place in his people and in this world is through time in the home. And countless men and women transcend their home environments to become faithful Christ followers. This happens all the time because God is a God of miracles. But the ordinary way that God designed for discipleship to take place, the place where it is most effective is going to be in the home. Home is the primary place of discipleship. And so if we can't get technology figured out in our home, we can't imagine that church is then going to fix it. Like if we come to church for a couple hours on Sunday, that it's magically going to take care of everything else, right? A couple hours on Sunday is going to make up for the countless other hours spent at home or at school or at work. It doesn't work that way. Home is where the main work of discipleship takes place. Church supplements that, encourages it. Church is where we come to be equipped for that work, but the home is essential. So if discipleship is not a priority in your home, then technology will take over. Technology will become to be in a negative role in your home life. But if discipleship is the goal, you need to understand how to roll technology in with that, how to rule over it in your home life. And so here are just a few practical suggestions for the home. Now, this is not a comprehensive list, and I would encourage you to think through ways to do that. Now, obviously, I've been following this pattern of 7, right? We serve, we rule, we rest, we actively engage, we have relationships, we're whole, we're fulfillment. We talk about fulfillment. I want us to put some practical suggestions with all of those in regards to technology, in regards to the home, in regards to becoming what God made us to be in discipleship. If we're going to be serving the Creator and technology is not going to tempt us into serving ourselves, here's some great ways that I've found to do that. Get a pet. That sounds so silly, but get a pet and your family, the people in your home, care for that pet together. All of a sudden, you can't be about yourself. When the dog whines at 2 a.m. to go outside, you quickly learn, probably better take the dog outside. You quickly learn that you're not as in control as you thought. Plant a garden. You know, it's incredible how de-digitalizing our world recenters us, how getting into the soil and the plants changes our mindset and gives us a sense of, I'm doing something that's not for me, right? This is what God did with Adam. He put him in a garden and said, go for it, man. And I think that we can do that same thing. We can engage our homes in that way. We're also meant to rule over technology. And so I would encourage you to place strict time limits on technology and how much time you will give to. And I would say that's going to be different for every family, but maybe set a don't use it before X time and don't use it after Y time. Or say I'm only going to allow 30 minutes a day of TV, or I'm only going to allow 15 minutes at lunch for Facebook, but set some strict limits on your technology use. Agree on a technology budget, right? With everybody offering a streaming service nowadays, with new phones coming out every 6 months, with new plans being pushed by each cell phone provider, right? It can run away from us in a hurry. One way to limit the influence of technology to make sure that you're ruling over it is to set a budget and stick to it. Don't add more stuff if you've agreed not to. Another way is to keep at least one space in your home free from technology. I would say that if you have a technologically free space, well, you don't have much because, like I said earlier, technology is anything, the product of human knowledge used to change the human experience of the world. So, I'm not advocating for no beds or no ovens. What I mean by technology, I'm talking about the digital devices. Limit screens. Say no screens in the bedrooms or something to that effect. Rest. One thing, this is an idea from Andy Crouch, his book, the TechWise Home or the TechWise Family. I think it should be required reading for every follower of Christ in the 21st century. But one of the practices they do is that for 1 hour a day, for 1 day a week, and for 1 week a year, their whole family gives up technology. 1 hour a day, 1 day a week, 1 week a year. It may seem like that's not possible, but I think it'd be a great goal to strive for. Active engagement. I would say before you turn on a technological device, before you turn on a screen, when you wake up in the morning, spend 5 minutes outside in creation. Spend 5 minutes, whether that creation is the city block you live on or that creation is your back 40. Just walk outside. Thank God for the day. Thank God for the grass. Thank God for the sunshine, for the rain, for the fog, for whatever it is. And be reminded that there's a real world out there before you get distracted by the vibrant colors of a screen. We're meant to be relational. We're meant to be in relationships. One thing that we've done in that is we've put filtering on our devices, and we have accountability set up for the content that's accessed on our digital devices. You could require, in order to promote relationship and not let technology tempt you into isolation, you could require that digital devices have to be used in common areas of the home so that even if somebody is on a screen, they're in a place where somebody else could come up and interrupt them and say, hey, I want to talk about this, or hey, have you thought about this? And, move from technology to conversation. We're also meant to be whole. And so I would encourage you to make it a goal to learn a new habit, a new skill, a new hobby, or learn something about a new subject at least once a year without depending on technology. This could be, say, hey, I've always wanted to learn how to be a woodworker. I've always wanted to learn how to build stuff. And guess what? You're going to use technology for that, but try to limit the amount of YouTube you use for it and instead go check out a book from the library. Do the hard work of reading and figuring out plans on paper. Right? Maybe you say, you know what? I've always wanted to learn how to play guitar. Well, pick up a real guitar and start figuring it out, but give yourself that opportunity to practice physical, mental, emotional, spiritual well-being in something like that. And I would say set aside time every week to evaluate the week past and the week ahead and your relationship to technology. That would be another way to pursue wholeness in that. Finally, we're meant to find fulfillment, but we're meant to find it as God intended. And so I would encourage you, particularly you who are parents, don't use technology as a reward in your home, right? Technology as a reward reinforces, hey, this is an object of fulfillment, right? So if something good happens, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I get this reward. And I find fulfillment in that. Don't use technology for that. Don't reinforce that temptation to find our fulfillment in technology. Another thing is I would encourage you, study the life of Jesus in the Gospels. Look at what Jesus did with his days. Look at his life and say, was this Jesus, this man, also the God-man, was he fulfilled? And I would say that yes. And what was it that he found fulfillment in? What was it that brought joy to Jesus? Study the life of Jesus and say, how did God fulfill him? And how then can God fulfill me? What is the path by which God meant me to seek fulfillment? What am I supposed to be living for? What matters the most? We're told to seek the kingdom first. Right? We're not meant to worry about these other things. The world seeks after those things. We're meant to seek after one thing, and that is the fulfillment of God's design for his creation. So you and I, we were made. We were made on purpose. God looked at the world and said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to put these people in this place at this time, and I'm going to make them in order that they might make something of the world around them and make something of the relationships that I've given them and train one another to be what I've made them and to establish homes, places, people who are going to be communities of transformation. And I'm going to give them the ability to make technology. I'm going to give them the ability to create something new and different out of the raw material I've handed them. And I'm going to see what they do with it. So now the burden is on us. We've been given this. We've been made for such a purpose. We've been tasked with this incredible task of serving the Creator, ruling over creation, of resting and actively engaging. We've been given the task of relating to one another, of being whole beings and being fulfilled in that. And I would encourage you, don't let technology tempt you away from God's design. Instead, say, how can I use this? How can I control this? How can I rule over this in order that God's plan and God's design might be furthered in my life? And that's going to do two things. It's going to glorify your Maker as you seek to do what he made you to do in a way that honors him. But it's also going to be good. It's going to be good for you. It's going to be good for your family and your home. It's going to be good for your community. And ultimately, I'm convinced that these are the things that God is going to use to change the world. So think about technology, think about discipleship, think about your home, and recognize this matters. Think well. If you have questions or anything you want to reach out and talk more about that, feel free to get in touch with me, and I'd love to be able to talk more about it. I hope this is helpful to you. God bless you, and have a great day.